Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
We are an inclusive faith community
seeking to live out the loving, just, and generous way of Jesus.
We are participants in a long tradition
that's less concerned with doctrines and dogma that demand total agreement,
but a life to be lived, enjoyed, and given away to others.
What unites us is a growing awareness that life is precious.
That we are made by love in order to love.
This community is comprised of and affirms the entire human family.
Regardless of race, age, creed,
physical abilities, marital or economic status,
gender identity, or sexual orientation.
So, if you're curious and have come to see,
if you are tired and have come to rest,
if you are grateful and have come to share,
if you are wounded and have come to heal,
if you're joyful and have come to celebrate,
if you are uprooted and have come to belong,
welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so kind to me. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so kind to me. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is darkness, let me sow light. For in the giving we shall receive, and in the dying we're given life. Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Where there is sorrow, let me sow hope. Where there is doubt, let me sow faith. Where there is injury, your pardon gift, your consolation to those in pain. Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Amen. Amen. Amen.
Hey, everybody. I'm here today with Jeff Babedas, who's the Director of Development and Communications with Family Promise of Wake County, and really excited to be able to do an interview with him. We have been involved with Family Promise of Wake County for a while, for many years prior to COVID, and we continue to be involved with them. Prior to COVID, Family Promise had a model where each church hosted families for a week, and for Crosspointe, that meant for a literal week, our clubhouse hallway where our kids are now were turned into mini apartments and a mini kitchen. And we welcomed between 3 and 5 families for an entire week. And they lived in our hallway, and the YMCA gave them access to showers, and we provided meals and transportation to and from the day center of Family Promise. When COVID hit, that transitioned to families living in Family Promise's transitional housing, and churches brought groceries and provided meals to families. And so now Family Promise has worked really, really hard to continue to house families, to house homeless families, unhoused families in Wake County, and have just done an incredible job pivoting and rethinking and listening to the community and the needs of the community. And I just wanted to talk to you, Jeff, about the ways that has changed, and how you do this program now, and why you're important to homeless, unhoused families in our community.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And thank you, Crosspointe folks, for everything that you do for housing, homelessness, and for Family Promise. We really appreciate all of you. So yeah, we used to do this sort of congregation rotation model, but now it just sort of makes sense to have everybody static. We have a 12-unit apartment building that's next door to our offices. It's former student housing. Forget all of the bad things that you remember about student housing. If you remember student housing, like the smells and all of that. What's great about student housing is that it's got that big central living space, and then 3 very large private bedrooms with their own bathrooms. So we can comfortably house a big family there, or if there are 2 smaller families, then we can provide shelter for them. So we're static now. And because we're static, we have been able to invest a lot in newer programming as well. So we're just really excited about what's been happening here. Yeah, so we have 6 different programs. So the first one is prevention. Mm-hmm. There is no better way to combat homelessness than by preventing it altogether. Mm-hmm. What we've found is that for roughly $750 per child per family, we can keep them in their current home.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's the same cost as 10 nights of shelter in one of our units. If a child experiences homelessness once as a child, they're 50% more likely to experience it as an adult. So prevention in a lot of ways is our best bet as far as ending that sort of generational cycle before it even starts. So the next one is called rapid rehousing. And what I've realized is that if there's a term that I don't understand here, it's usually self-explanatory. Okay. So rapid rehousing, get this, is rehousing people rapidly.
Amazing.
Yeah, you're welcome. So rapid rehousing is a great way to either divert families, or if somebody is staying in emergency shelter, to very quickly find them a place to exit to. Right now, we just this last week received new statistics that only 20% of people who leave shelter programs graduate to stable permanent housing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's low.
Our graduation rate for our programs is something like 77%. We are insanely proud of that. Yeah. But well, thank you. But by and large, it's tough. It's tough to find a place for people to exit to.
Now, is the lack of affordable housing in the area making that difficult to find houses for people?
Absolutely. Okay. Just a couple months ago, we housed our first family in Halifax County. We have to go far out sometimes. Okay. But we for family, I can't remember the family size, but we recently were able to find a place for one of our families exiting our shelter program just over in Morrisville. So the third one is transitional housing. And transitional housing in some ways is sort of the opposite approach to rapid rehousing. Rapid rehousing says housing first. find a place for families to live, and then give the wraparound service. And transitional housing says, yeah, but what if? So the example that I tend to use is I grew up in more urban environments. If someone were to say to me tomorrow, Jeff, congratulations, you've just inherited a farm. You can move in tomorrow. All your problems are solved. I'm going to say, I don't know what to do with a farm. I have 2 young kids. I don't need cows. I don't know the first thing about how to run a farm. And so what we find with some people who are in a rapid rehousing program, they aren't necessarily ready for a house. So in our program, what that looks like is they spend a year in one of our 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom units. And during that time, they work and they save. And we hold a third of everything they make in escrow for them. And so after a year, they graduate, and they graduate with a nest egg. And it's fantastic. And they just learn the basics of, here's how you turn on your utilities. Here's a payment schedule for that. All of the things that in some ways we kind of take for granted if we haven't moved recently, because home ownership and home procurement is tough. And not everybody knows how to navigate it. So for people who need housing first, we have rapid rehousing. For people who need housing ready, we have transitional housing. And we have both of these programs because there's no one way that people enter into homelessness. So there's not going to be one good exit. So our other programs real quick, and then we can talk about how they sort of work together. So we have emergency shelter, which is just traditional emergency shelter for up to 12 weeks for families. And that's the big thing that sets us apart and makes us different, is that we specifically focus on families because that's sort of a unique need. Families very often have had to make the choice of, do we sleep in our car but stay together? Or do we separate into 3 age and gender specific shelters throughout the city? We make it so that families don't have to make that decision. I hear that of the family shelters, of which there are very few in Wake County, we're the only one that lets a family define what a family is for themselves. So if it's mom and dad, if it's dad and dad, if it's mom and mom, I think that we're unique in the fact that we take on whatever a family looks like for themselves. And then the other 2 are post-shelter stabilization programs. And this is another one of those terms that's big but self-explanatory. It's just providing stability after somebody leaves shelter. And then the other one is a partnership with the Triangle Apartment Association. It's called New Lease on Life. And people who graduate from our transitional housing program can live in an apartment at a reduced rate, guaranteed for 2 years while they continue to get on their feet. This is another reason why we like having as many programs as we do, is because they're able to work in tandem with each other in a continuum. So as a real life example, we had a woman who was living in her car with her daughter, I think about 8 or 9 years ago. She entered into our emergency shelter program. And then decided that she wanted to apply for our transitional housing program. So she ended up being with us for 12 weeks plus another year while she got on her feet, and then got into the New Lease on Life program. She, I guess, 7 years ago, she received that apartment with New Lease on Life. She's still there.
Wow.
Her kids are adults. I think they've both graduated from college now. And she's on our board.
Wow,
so,
that's incredible. What a great story.
So she's great. It's a really cool story of how all of these work together.
And I guess my other questions are, why is there a need for Family Promise in Wake County? What's happening in Wake County that makes it necessary to even have family shelters?
The very easy answer is lack of affordable housing. And I say that's an easy answer because there are a lot of things that contribute to homelessness, right? institutional racism, addictions, mental illness, all of these things can contribute to homelessness. But as far as real causes go, it's plain and simple lack of affordable housing. The way that it was explained to me was imagine a game of musical chairs. The entire premise of musical chairs is that there's just not enough chairs to go around, right? So yeah, if there were more chairs, everybody would get a seat.
What are some dreams that Family Promise has for the future? What are some things that you are working on and working toward? And, what are you looking forward to and dreaming about?
Yeah, I think that, well, there are a couple of things. One is that most of these programs, like our rapid rehousing and our prevention, these are new programs that we were able to launch with COVID relief money. A big thing for us right now is fundraising so that we can keep those programs going. Another big thing is that we have this building where my office is. There are a lot of things in this building that we used to use as a day center that we just don't need anymore. So we have 6 bathrooms here with showers in them, but now all of our families, since they're in apartments, have showers. So we have 6 huge bathrooms with showers. The running joke is every staff person has claimed their own bathroom at this point because we only have 7 people on staff. Even still, there's just tons and tons of space that we're not using. So we're trying to figure out, as far as big dreams, big plans, it's what's next for this building. What if this could be a sort of place where all sorts of organizations at least had satellite offices so that people could just walk down the hall. And then another thing is, well, what if we followed trend in this town anyway and built up? What if we built a few more stories on this building and turned them into emergency shelter units?
I want to give you a minute to talk about Night Without a Bed and fundraising. And I will, I want to make sure Crosspointe understands, at least at a base level, we donate to you all. So we consider you a ministry partner, and we still bring meals a couple of times a year, as needed. And then our students go and volunteer at your space and do a lot of things. And, we donate money to you all, but there's other ways that you can get involved with Family Promise as well. Tell us a little bit about Night Without a Bed, and you've done great videos about that we'll share with everybody, but just briefly, like, what is it? How do we support you? Why is it helpful?
Yeah, so Night Without a Bed is very simple. You forego the comfort of your bed for a night to, I don't know, sleep in your car, out under the stars in your backyard. Use your imagination and feel free to be ridiculous. Feel free to come up with something kind of bonkers if you want to. And then you post about it on social media using hashtag Night Without a Bed. And then you just ask your friends, family, and followers to sponsor you with a donation to Family Promise of Wake County. Because this is a fundraiser, but it's also an awareness builder. Because family homelessness in particular is an invisible problem. Going back to that woman who went through all of our programs before, or 3 of our programs, sort of in that continuum. One of the things that she talks about is just how she was so ashamed to tell anyone what she was going through. And so the folks who are quietly suffering, sleeping in their cars night after night, a lot of people just don't know that that's happening because of the shame associated with it. And also because I think that a lot of people associate homelessness with the woman sleeping on a bench or the guy in the median holding a sign asking for money. So the more we can say, no, there are lots of families going without beds together, and that's not the only picture of homelessness, those other things that we talked about. The more eye-catching the post is that can raise awareness about that and make it not an invisible problem so people don't have to suffer quietly anymore, the better.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want people to know about Family Promise or homelessness or
really just thank you. What this really is going to take is grassroots organizations and corporations and faith communities and nonprofits all working together and all contributing something. And the more collaboration I see, the more hope I have. So the fact that you all are going to such lengths to try to collaborate with so many different organizations, that's a huge thing. And based on what we've seen in other cities who have had major affordable housing crises, the thing that got them out were these sort of partnerships. So I love seeing partnerships, and we love and appreciate you guys so much. So thank you for all of the different things that you do for us and for affordable housing in general.
Good morning, Crosspointe. I've got a couple of announcements for you this morning. This Tuesday, October 17th at 7 p.m. online is our next parenting lab. We know that it can be difficult to find that balance between honoring your kids' feelings, but not just giving them permission to live in their comfort zones. So we want to talk about that. We've invited Dr. Hope Seidel, who's a local pediatrician and parent coach, to come and speak on comfort zones, social anxiety, and friendships. You can find out more information at crosspoint.org. Now that we've gotten settled into the new school year, we know that many of you may have questions about family ministry at Crosspointe. So we want to invite you to an open house of sorts next Sunday, October 22nd, right after service. We'll be in the den, the clubhouse large group room, and the treehouse large group room. There won't be a formal program or agenda. It'll just be a chance for you to come by, say hello, and ask any questions that you might have. We hope we'll see you there. If you want to contribute financially to all the awesome things that Crosspointe is doing in our community, including Night Without a Bed and Habitat Wake, you could find out more at crosspoint.org/contribute or text crosspointenc to 77977. Thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Well, this is one of those rare weeks where I had been working on a particular teaching, and then midweek there was just this sense of, this doesn't feel like the best timing for this specific message. And there's a handful of reasons for that. But in the rare moments when that happens, my typical default is to ask, is there something going on right now that does feel timely to talk about? And as I sat with that and tried to pay attention to what's going on in me and what I'm hearing from others and what I see in the world, I kept coming back to the reality that, there's just a lot going on in my own heart these days. And I'm seeing and hearing that same thing in so many other people. There's just a lot. And the thing is, what's going on in our individual and collective hearts, it matters. It's worth paying attention to. Thousands of years ago, we found this piece of wisdom in the scriptures that still rings true today, where the author writes, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." That in this author's quest for life's best wisdom, he comes to this conclusion and insists that priority number one is to guard our hearts, because absolutely everything flows from the heart. And obviously, he's not talking in purely literal terms of the muscular organ inside our chest, but it's about guarding our inner world, our emotional center, paying attention to how we feel. That's how they thought about the heart thousands of years ago. It's still how we think about guarding our hearts today. And yet the truth is, that's often incredibly complicated. Because I imagine that you, like me, can find yourself bombarded by so many different feelings at the same time that we really don't know what to do with all of them. Now, thankfully, that same collection of wisdom writings in the scriptures reveals that that's always been normal. One ancient writer puts it this way. He says, "Even in laughter the heart may ache, and rejoicing may end in grief." Because that's just how life is. There's all these different realities we find ourselves confronted by and that we have to deal with, and it feels like there's these seemingly opposite emotions all trying to coexist in us, and that can be hard. For instance, just this past week, I found myself celebrating with multiple friends who were embarking on great trips, and they were filled with such joy and anticipation, and I was so happy for them. And then I also found myself with my wife and my college-age sons who were home for fall break, and we sat around and got to watch some mindless shows and some comedy specials and just let ourselves laugh, and man, that was good. And then I found myself getting to watch some sports and teams that I love, and it doesn't really make much sense rationally why I get so much enjoyment out of those moments, but I do. They make me happy. But then I also found myself sitting down with a friend, and I listened to them talk about their experiences with the racism that they've experienced here in the Raleigh-Durham area. And I found myself feeling angry and also discouraged because I know that these aren't isolated incidents. And then I turn on the news, and there's headlines of a vicious attack and now a war in the Middle East, where over 2,000 people have already been killed. And there's this immediate pressure to have concrete opinions about all of it, regardless if those opinions are well informed or not. And then on the news and social media, there's an avalanche of people telling all of us what our concrete opinions should be. And what easily gets lost in all of that is more than 2,000 people have been killed, and more will most certainly die. And it's devastating and heartbreaking. And so we offer empathy and we hold space for those who are grieving and scared, but yet you can also feel helpless and powerless, not really knowing what to do to help. And that's its own frustrating reality. Then I'm talking with a friend and they go, "Did you hear about the earthquake in Afghanistan?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't even hear about that." And come to find out that over 2,000 people died this week there, 90% of whom are estimated to be women and children who ran back into their homes during the earthquake while men were working in their fields, and homes collapsed on them. And part of me feels more sadness and grief, and then another part of me goes, I can't try to process all of that too right now. And so I just kind of decide to compartmentalize it for a bit and try to revisit it later, because I also don't want to be the kind of person that can be apathetic to that level of suffering. But then sometimes it feels like it's necessary to do that for some of us to manage the emotions of it all. And then I find myself sitting with different sets of parents who are trying to navigate some gut-wrenching challenges with their kids this week, like consume your whole world type of challenges. And I think to myself, how in the world must they feel when someone tries to tell them that they have to have concrete feelings and opinions about something happening on the other side of the world, when all they can realistically attempt to handle is the incredibly overwhelming situation staring them right in their face in their own homes? And then still, I find myself rejoicing with friends who just brought new life into the world. And in a similar way, I find myself hoping for them that they can feel the freedom to just rejoice in this moment, to savor and soak it all in without the pressure of feeling like they have to carry others' pain and grief in the world right now. And that not doing so doesn't reflect poorly on the kind of loving person they are. In fact, it's the opposite. It shows what kind of loving person they are by being present and rejoicing in the moment right in front of them. And friends, that was just this week. And I didn't even mention the unprecedented chaos in Washington, D.C., right? And so there's all these different feelings and emotions we're confronted with. And you feel the same thing in similar situations you find yourself navigating in your day-to-day life. And when we're trying to figure out what's going on in our heart right now, which is it? Am I angry or am I grateful? Am I scared? Am I hopeful? Am I encouraged or discouraged? Am I happy or am I sad? And we need to know that the answer can be yes. Because the reality is, this isn't an either-or thing. Our hearts contain several different things going on at once. There's an Old Testament scholar named Derek Kidner who writes, "Our moods are not permanent and are seldom unmingled with their opposites." Because often that's just how life is. It's unavoidable. We'll have different things going on in our hearts at the same time. And so for the next few moments, I want to try and offer us a few handles to how to navigate that reality in healthier ways. Because for whatever reason, when I had to scrap the message I had previously planned for this week, this kind of thing just felt like it could potentially be the most helpful. So first, I want to encourage you to get in the habit of pausing and identifying, what are the feelings I'm experiencing right now? Now, typically, you and I, we're just not very good at this. We're just not. Researcher Brene Brown says that over the last several years, she's received back over 15,000 emotion inventory surveys from people. And the average number of emotions that people can identify in themselves is 3. Now, that may sound surprising, but not really when we consider, where do we consistently teach people about their heart from kindergarten to 12th grade? Where do we teach them about their emotions and feelings and how to distinguish and process them? So as a result, the vast majority of people tend to identify three, the trifecta of glad, sad, and mad. I mean, we understand being happy, we understand being sad, and we understand being angry or ticked off. And many times we live with the assumption that we're either one or the other pretty much all the time. But then many of us find ourselves in weeks like this past one, with all sorts of things going on in our own personal lives, all sorts of things happening in our friends and families' lives, and the lives of people all over the globe. And we can easily get overwhelmed and exhausted because it seems like there's too many feelings and emotions going on in our heart, and we frankly have no handles on how to deal with all of them. And then to make it worse, we feel this pressure to pick just one. To figure out, okay, how am I feeling right now? Like we think it's supposed to be just one thing, when again the reality is, as the scripture writer says, even in laughter the heart may ache, and rejoicing may end in grief. And we are trying to solve a problem that isn't meant to be solved by coming up with merely one. So what if you put into practice this week, pausing at least 15 seconds to ask yourself, okay, what are the feelings I'm experiencing right now? And to pause intentionally and ask yourself that question after you read or see the headline on a news report, before you go and have the conversation with your kid or your partner or your boss or an employee. And then after you have that conversation as well, ask yourself, what are the feelings I'm experiencing right now? That you take a moment and you check in with your heart. Now, the thing is, we typically need help identifying emotions and feelings because, again, most of us default to only three: sad, mad, and glad. And I've mentioned this before, but a helpful resource is something called a feelings wheel. You can Google it, but again, here's what it looks like. And it gives us help by allowing us to explore over 150 specific emotions. It can give us better insight and help us identify what's actually going on in us, rather than defaulting to sad, mad, and glad. For example, about a week ago, I found myself feeling a lot of sadness and anger around another pastor. He has a large platform. He had an opportunity to speak clearly on the equity and equality of marginalized people, but instead he kind of danced in the ambiguity and eventually aligned with more oppressive voices in the way that he danced. And I immediately defaulted to two of the trifecta. I was sad and I was mad for a variety of reasons. But as I sat more with that and tried to reflect on the feelings I was actually experiencing, what I started to realize is that while those two emotions were certainly there was also a lot of grief and regret. Because what I started to realize was that it was forcing me to look back on a previous version of myself several years ago that did the same thing. And this moment was kind of holding up a mirror to me of my previous self. And so some of what was going on inside of me, not all of it, but some of it, was projecting anger at him because of what it reminded me about my own past and regret and shame. But the thing is, often life is moving so fast that I don't always do that. I don't pause long enough to simply stop and honestly reflect on what are the feelings I'm experiencing right now. Some of you who are parents have experienced that same thing with your kids before, where you find yourself feeling so angry at them and we rush into these confrontations with them. But what we can miss is that many times what is fueling that anger is actually fear. We're scared because perhaps we made similar mistakes ourselves when we were younger and experienced a lot of pain and regret. We felt ashamed. We paid consequences. We hurt other people in the process. And we desperately don't want our kids to experience those same things. But instead it just comes out as anger because we don't pay attention long enough to really wrestle with what emotions we're actually experiencing. You see, if we aren't moving toward a greater awareness of what's specifically happening in our own hearts, then often what happens is we end up placing or projecting the most ignored and undealt with emotions inside of us onto others. So we have to learn to listen to our hearts, to pay attention to them, to get familiar with what's going on inside of us, and being honest about that. That's why it's a simple but really profound question to consistently pause and ask, what are the feelings I'm experiencing right now? Now here's a second handle I think that's worth being reminded of. Be gentle with yourself because you're not designed to carry everyone's grief. Again, this is just reminding you of something that you likely already know, but technology continues to evolve at an exponentially high rate. A few hundred years ago, you would have been primarily aware in a given moment about what was going on in your own life, and perhaps a handful of others maybe in neighboring farms. But today, you and I have devices in our pockets that can make us nearly instantly aware of almost any crisis in the entire globe being experienced by any number of the billions of individuals on the planet. And that alone can be completely overwhelming. Not to even mention the hundreds or thousands of people you may personally be connected with on things like social media that you have some invested interest in their life. And because of those realities, you can feel like that in order to be a loving person, it's your responsibility to carry everyone else's grief and pain and tragedies and crisis. And here's what I want you to know. Yes, you can absolutely hold space for people's grief around the globe. You can be empathetic. You can be informed. You can be concerned. If there is something you can do, by all means, do it. But it is not your responsibility to absorb, to take on, and to carry every single person's on the face of the earth's grief and pain. It's just not. It's impossible. And in my opinion, our own hearts and emotional capacity haven't evolved nearly as fast as technology has. 500 years from now, people may very well have learned how to adjust and navigate that immediate access to information all super well, but we're right in the middle of this tech and info revolution. And so I think we just have to be gentle with ourselves as we figure it out as human beings. Because if we don't, we can easily find ourselves overwhelmed by the grief and pain of billions of individuals all over the world to the point where we lose the capacity to love ourselves and the people right around us well. Which let's not forget is what Jesus invites us to do, to love your neighbor as yourself. Again, as you love yourself. Next, here's another question I come back to on a regular basis that I learned from that same Brene Brown, where it's simply, am I here to get it right or be right? Whenever we find ourselves in situations where there's a lot of emotionally charged reactions, whether that's with world events or a disagreement with someone over politics, or we find ourselves at odds with a spouse or a partner or a teenager, we find ourselves backing different ideas and solutions with a coworker or a boss or an employee, it's incredibly important to stop and ask the question, am I here to get it right or be right? Because you see, an attitude of, I'm here to get it right, is infused with this built-in sense of humility. It's a willingness to ask questions and to listen to different perspectives and to try and understand. Because I'm here in this moment, not to be right, but to do my best to get it right. It comes with a willingness to learn and to take responsibility for mistakes. It comes with the willingness to quickly and sincerely apologize when you recognize that you're wrong. It comes with a willingness to change your mind and actions when new, better, and more loving and just ways to be human are made known to you. It comes with a willingness to intentionally seek out and listen to different perspectives and learn different context from your own. All of that is contained in the attitude of, you know what, I'm here to try to get it right. But when we approach a conversation or interaction with an attitude of, I'm here to be right, what we bring with us is an attitude prone to defensiveness and arrogance. We assume our sources of information, our assumptions, our influences are the best and the most accurate. And they, by default, make us right. We can find ourselves with our minds already made up before listening, and then demanding to be understood and to be seen as right. And even if one may find themselves pausing to listen to another's perspective, it's typically the only kind of listening that is an attempt to be nice and polite until you can present your own better point of view. And this attitude of, I'm here to be right, often comes with this demand to be seen as right because of one's position of power or authority. You know what? I am the correctly informed one. It's this attitude of, I'm the morally superior one. My team is the morally superior one. I'm on the best team. I'm the parent. I'm the boss. I'm the coach. I'm the leader. I decide what's right. And it's often surrounded by an intense pressure to be right, or at least be seen as right, because of the cost that may come with actually not being right. It can cost you your authority or your leverage, your influence, your source of income. Your reputation as the one who always has the right answers. It may cost you the framework you've grown up with your entire life that has the built-in assumption that this is the right way to see things. And understand, that can feel incredibly threatening. And so whenever there's this pressure of, you know what, I have to be right, I can't under any circumstances be seen as wrong, it leads to things like pretending. It leads to lying, making up stories and evidence, ignoring other evidence. And whenever one gets cornered and faced with the truth, you'll often notice that there's this desperate attempt to spin and deflect and blame others. You see this anger rise up in people so that they can find a way to still be seen as right and get other people to surrender to their particular perspective. Which is why in any conversation, any conflict, any disagreement, it's so important to keep asking this question and keep it in front of us. Am I here to get it right or be right? Now, practically speaking, to our present moment, while I know it won't be satisfactory or enough for some, maybe for many of you, if there's a couple ways I can suggest as basic starting points that we can collectively try to get it right with our responses in regards to the war happening in Gaza and Israel right now. One is that we show up with empathy. Innocent people are being attacked and killed. So we grieve with all those affected and dignify their own grief and pain without trying to justify or explain their heartache to them or tell them how they should feel. We can listen and we can grieve with them. And that's what love can look like for many of us right now, especially for those of us who are Western Christian Americans. What we need to do is being willing to listen, and we can grieve with them and show up with our empathy and hold space for all of that. And then secondly, we can refuse to dehumanize anyone. There's a lot of dehumanizing rhetoric going around, and eventually, as we've witnessed time and time again in our culture, rhetoric shapes how others get treated, how people get treated. One of our Crosspointe board members, Lydia Matumbo, who's lived through and experienced similar situations, shared such a good reminder with me the other day when she said, when you feel powerless in a situation like this, don't underestimate the power you can have by simply smiling at someone, saying hello, dignifying someone else's existence. Because here's the thing, there will be a lot of people connected to this war by family, ethnicity, religion, culture, walking among us all every day that may be complete strangers to you. Now, many will also be friends and loved ones, and so we naturally know how to treat them. But let's just talk about strangers for a moment. You may see them in a store or around town somewhere, and the escalating tensions will have many feeling isolated, fearful, and threatened. Sometimes simply based on the color of their skin, their cultural heritage, or religious clothing that they may wear. Listen, don't underestimate how much smiling at someone can do. Nodding your head at them, saying hello, simply being kind. It's a simple way to remind people that they belong, that they're valued. Because when tensions and harmful rhetoric escalate, people often feel the opposite. So let's be people that don't neglect the simple basic things that actually have a lot of power when we can feel powerless in terms of how to help. And then lastly, one more handle in the spirit of guarding our hearts and prioritizing them as wisdom suggests. Let's make sure and keep asking the question, what is it that keeps my own heart alive? You know, one of the interesting things is that if you ask people, what are some practices, routines, rituals you do to help keep your heart alive? Most people can come up with some pretty specific answers. But then when you ask them, well, when was the last time you did one of those things? What you often hear is something like, well, you know, I don't really remember. It's been a long time, maybe months ago, for sure, maybe a couple years ago, something I can't really remember. And usually the excuse we come up with is, well, I'm just too busy, or I just haven't really been able to make time for it, I guess. Or for others of us, we can feel guilty for doing something that we enjoy or that gives us life while there's pain and heartache swirling around us. And the thing is, we end up treating the idea of keeping our own hearts alive as some sort of indulgent elective, rather than as an essential part of being a healthy person, recognizing the wisdom from the scriptures is true, that everything we do flows from our heart. And one thing I've learned is that we can't buy into this myth of oh, well, you know what? I'll get to those kind of things when life slows down a bit. I mean, this busyness, it's just a season. Some of us have been saying that same thing for a few years now. And if that's you, you need to figure out a way to keep your own heart alive rather than treating it like a luxury. And sometimes that means being intentional about making some tweaks. And sometimes that means making some drastic changes. It can be different for all of us, but it's worth making it a priority to keep our hearts alive, because if we don't, weeks like this past one can crush us. Weeks like this past one can find our own hearts becoming overwhelmed with heavy emotions coming from all sorts of different angles and directions, leaving us overwhelmed and exhausted and paralyzed on so many different fronts. But if we want to be a people, and I'm saying this to myself and to all of us, we want to be a people that can show up for others when they need love, who can hold space for people in their grief, who can listen well and advocate for justice and the dignity of all human beings. It begins with paying attention to and learning to be honest with our own hearts, confronting the reality of what's in there, giving ourselves permission to feel all the different things that we're actually feeling, and perhaps even change how we think about some things in the process. And then also creating similar space and grace for others to do the same. And so we just keep coming back to the heart of the story that Jesus invites us to live out together, to love others the way we want to be loved. Friends, it's been a hard week, but let's keep guarding our hearts and living out a good story together. You're loved.
If you would like to know more or get connected to Crosspointe, go to crosspointenc.org. If you're in need of care or assistance, go to crosspointe.org/care. And welcome home.